In 1850's rural America, families faced a brutal winter dilemma. With no electric refrigerators, they had to store enough food to last from October through April. The success of their household often depended on mastering preservation techniques that had been passed down through generations. Families would gather in the spring to prepare for the long months ahead, carefully selecting which foods would be preserved through various methods. These early American households understood that survival meant learning to make food last, not just abundant. The most common American preservation method was the root cellar, a natural underground storage space that maintained consistent temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. These cellars, often dug into hillsides or built into the earth, allowed families to store potatoes, apples, carrots, and other root vegetables for months. The Earth's natural thermal mass provided the perfect environment, with the soil acting as a massive thermal regulator. Families would carefully select their root cellar locations, often choosing spots with good drainage and stable soil temperatures. Pickling emerged as one of America's most popular preservation methods, particularly among immigrant communities who brought their own recipes. Families would carefully prepare brine solutions using salt, water, and sometimes vinegar, then submerge vegetables like cucumbers, beets, and cabbage in these preserving liquids. The process required patience and precise timing, as families would often prepare large batches during summer months when fresh produce was abundant. Each family had their own secret recipes, passed down through generations, with specific ratios of salt, sugar, and spices that made their pickled goods distinctive. The invention of the canning process in the 1800s revolutionized American food preservation. Families would carefully prepare their own canned goods, often gathering in the summer months to process large quantities of fruits and vegetables. The process required careful attention to sterilization, proper sealing, and temperature control. Families would often create entire canning seasons, with the whole household participating in the preparation. These preserved foods would then be stored in cool, dark pantries, providing sustenance through the long winter months. Meat preservation through smoking and curing was essential for American families, particularly those in rural areas. Families would carefully prepare their own hams, bacon, and sausages using traditional methods that had been passed down for generations. The process involved salt curing, air drying, and sometimes smoking over hardwood fires. These preserved meats could last for months, providing crucial protein during winter months when fresh meat was scarce. The skill of meat preservation was often a family secret, with each household having their own specific techniques and flavor combinations. Salt curing or salting was perhaps the most fundamental preservation method in American households. Families would carefully salt meats and fish, then store them in cool, dry locations. The salt drew out moisture, preventing bacterial growth and extending shelf life. Drying was another crucial technique, with families using smokehouses, sun drying, or even simple air drying methods. The process required careful monitoring of humidity and temperature, as too much moisture would cause spoilage, while too little would make the food unpalatable. These methods were particularly important for families who couldn't afford to purchase preserved goods from stores. Fermentation was a crucial preservation technique that American families mastered over generations. Families would create their own fermented vegetables, particularly cabbage for sauerkraut, and various pickled vegetables. The fermentation process required specific temperatures and timing, with families often having designated fermentation vessels and specific locations for the process. These fermented foods not only preserved vegetables, but also provided beneficial probiotics. The fermentation process was often a family activity, with multiple generations participating in the preparation and monitoring of the fermentation process. Bread was a cornerstone of American food preservation, particularly during winter months. Families would bake large quantities of bread, often using traditional methods that had been passed down through generations. The process required careful attention to ingredients, timing, and storage conditions. Families would often prepare their own flour, using traditional mills or grinding their own grain. The preservation of bread involved careful storage in cool, dry locations, often using special bread boxes or storage containers. These breads could last for weeks or months when properly stored. American families understood that successful preservation began with successful gardening and harvesting. Families would carefully plan their gardens to ensure they had enough produce for both immediate consumption and preservation. The harvest season was a crucial time when families would work together to gather and prepare their crops. They would often plant specific varieties that were best suited for preservation, rather than just for fresh eating. The timing of harvests was critical, as families would prepare their storage areas in advance to ensure proper preservation conditions. American families operated on strict seasonal cycles of preservation, with each season bringing specific tasks and methods. Spring brought the preparation of root cellars and the start of canning activities. Summer was dedicated to the harvest and the processing of fresh produce. Fall brought the completion of preservation activities and the storage of goods. Winter was the time when families would carefully monitor their stored goods, rotating items and checking for spoilage. These seasonal cycles were so ingrained in American culture that families would often begin their preservation activities before the harvest was complete. Preservation was not just a family activity, but a community practice in many American towns. Families would often share their preserved goods, exchanging different types of preserved foods. This sharing system was particularly important in rural communities where families might not have access to diverse preserved foods. The exchange of preserved goods was often a social activity, with families gathering to share their preserved items and exchange preservation techniques. These community exchanges helped families diversify their preserved foods and learn new preservation methods. American families invested heavily in preservation tools, from simple wooden barrels to complex smoking equipment. These tools were often passed down through generations and carefully maintained. Families would often build or modify their own preservation equipment, adapting traditional designs to their specific needs. The quality of preservation tools was crucial, as poor equipment could lead to spoilage and wasted food. These tools were often the pride of the household, with families taking great care in their maintenance and storage. Preservation techniques in America evolved significantly over the 1800s, with families adapting methods from various cultures and improving upon traditional approaches. The introduction of new materials, such as glass jars and improved canning equipment, revolutionized the process. Families would often experiment with new techniques, combining traditional methods with new innovations. These improvements were often shared through family networks and community exchanges, leading to more effective and efficient preservation methods. The evolution of preservation techniques reflected the changing needs and resources of American families over time. The traditional preservation methods of American families created a lasting legacy that continues to influence modern food practices. Many of these techniques, from root cellaring to fermentation, are still practiced today by homesteaders and traditional food enthusiasts. The knowledge and skills developed by these families were crucial for survival during harsh winters and economic hardship. These preservation methods were not just about keeping food, they were about building resilience and self-sufficiency. The wisdom of these preservation techniques represents a time